Hello everyone, it's Lavender Leaf, and today I'm going to teach you how to draw backgrounds. Learning about backgrounds is very important for any artist. They set the tone for your drawing and help your characters feel like a part of a world. Alright, let's get started. So my first tip for creating backgrounds is to start by looking for references. Search through the internet or take pictures around you to gain references for the type of background you'd want to create. One website I like to use for references is called Character Design References. This website is filled with professional portfolios filled with character designs and background designs. Another thing I like to do is to look through my art books for inspiration. It can be great to look through an art book and see the artist's thought process for how they made the illustrations. Once you find the images you're looking for, put them all together to create a mood board to understand what you want to make for your background. For my illustration, I plan to have my character Will playing his ukulele in a garden. So gather images you like, and it'll help you think of what you want to do for your background. So the next thing I do for drawing backgrounds is to draw multiple small sketches for what you want to do for your final illustration. During this stage, I find it's good to try out different camera angles. The top left one, I have it facing at eye level, which is what most illustrations are at. At the middle left one, I have it facing from a worm's eye view, which is basically from the ground and looking up towards the sky. And then in the bottom left one, I have it from a bird's eye view. Literally, I actually added birds. Another great thing I recommend doing is to figure out your focal point. For my illustration, I wanted it to be Will. I usually placed him in the middle of the illustrations, and I used the trees as a frame for the drawing as well. Doing things like these helps your focal point stand out. It's also good to figure out whether you want a horizontal or vertical image. I find that sometimes certain images work better horizontally, whereas others work better vertically. While I was drawing these illustrations, I figured that the trees framed Will better in the vertical illustration in the middle. Now that I've settled on an idea, I start the final illustration, and the first thing I do is focus on my layers. For any background artist, it's very important to have layers. What I like to do is to separate them into categories. I like to have a foreground, midground, and background. Generally, you'd want to add the most details in your foreground, then add less details in the midground, and very few details in the background. But there's always exceptions. For my illustration, the background's my focal point. Here I have Will playing his ukulele on a bench. In the midground I have some bushes, and in the foreground I have some birds on trees. I think having a foreground, midground, and background adds a lot of depth to your illustrations. I'd recommend this for anyone wanting to do backgrounds. So my next tip is on lighting. Lighting is super important for backgrounds. It helps visually communicate the mood of your drawings. Bright backgrounds can be more lively and warm, backgrounds with midtones are usually calming and quiet, and dark backgrounds can be somber and unsettling. As you can see, all these backgrounds have different moods to them based on the lighting. Another thing to keep in mind for lighting is your focal point. If you have a generally bright background, it's important to have your focal point be darker so it stands out. And if you have a dark background, make your focal point bright. Notice how the moon in this illustration catches your eye the most. Well, that's because it's contrasting the most against the background. For my new illustration, I paired lighting with colors. I used yellow for the bright bench and bushes in the background, and I used a darker blue in the foreground for the trees and the flowers. If you're like me and do the coloring and lighting at the same time, it's a very good idea to take a picture of your art and put a grayscale filter on it. I find that using a grayscale filter helps me understand my lighting a lot better than if I were to just look at the colors. Oftentimes we can get distracted by the colors. I won't be going over any specific tips with color in this video, since I think that can make for its own video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see a color theory video. The last tip I have is adding the little details. It can be great to add details to your illustration to help it pop. One thing I did for my illustration is adding in a bit of line art. Line art can be great to emphasize what is or what is not important in the illustration. It can be a great way to help it pop out. Another detail that can be helpful for your illustrations is textures. Adding textures in the foreground and your focal point can really help it set it apart from your background. I added some textures in my illustration by adding some gradients to the flowers, as well as adding some curls to the bushes. One other thing I did throughout the illustration is separating some of the leaves from the bushes to make it look like that they're floating. Obviously, this is not realistic, but if you're going for a more cartoony or cute type of illustration, I think it can make it really charming. And I'm finished my background. I'm really happy with how my illustration turned out. For most of my illustrations, I usually have an outline to them, but I think trying a lineless style really got me to focus on my colors and my lighting, and I think the style is really cute. It looks a lot like a children's book cover. Thank you all for watching the video. If you got any ideas for future videos, then be sure to leave it in the comments. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.